We would like to take this time to dedicate this introduction to each and every life lost in senseless mass shootings and hate crimes around the world. Our condolences to both family and friends who have lost loved ones in any mass shootings. Innocent citizens, young and old, have lost their lives time and again in these killing sprees, while we've seen virtually no change in gun legislation throughout the U.S. Tonight, we pay tribute to these lives and discuss how mass shootings are affecting our lives today.
Before we get started, we want to mention that today's video may be a trigger for some listeners. We are discussing sensitive material that may be a trigger for some. We want you all to know that we deeply value your wellness and mental health. If you believe our discussion may be a trigger for you, please join us in the next CaCo Talks.
So today's episode, we are talking about mass shootings. And we also want to acknowledge that we are kind of just reviewing different events that have happened in America specifically, while acknowledging the lives that were lost and the impact that this has currently have or had and has on our society today, right? So we want to proceed through this episode with caution and while being compassionate and aware of those who have maybe affected by said events. And while this is, a much needed conversation, it's also a difficult conversation just because of the current political climate concerning, things like guns and whatnot through the United States. So this is going to be an interesting episode to say the least, but a needed conversation. So, Courtney, is there anything you want to add before we get started?
Yeah, as we stated earlier, the trigger warning, we do actually want to make sure that people who may have some sort of attachment to a mass shooting, or anyone who has lost a loved one or knows somebody who's lost a loved one, if you are struggling with mental health or any issues, physical health related to dealing with the grief and the result of something like a mass shooting, we definitely recommend, seeking the resources that are available to everyone for dealing with this sort of thing. These are I don't want to say unprecedented times, but it's the amount of mass shootings that are happening daily is concerning. And so you have every right to feel very not okay with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it is something that it feels deeply uncontrollable, but also there's not enough being done by the nation that we live in, or the government that we live in to attempt to prevent something horrific like this happening.
Exactly. Yeah.
So just want to re-emphasize that, and that we also I want to emphasize too that we do want to celebrate the lives, even though we are discussing the facts and figures of this I don't want to call it crisis, but this epidemic of shootings. I want to say that that really we want to celebrate the lives that are lost in this, because it's been far too many for sure.
Oh yeah. So we're going to go ahead and get in this episode. Like Courtney said, if there's something that you mentally just cannot handle or take right now, I would advise you to maybe just join us in the next video. We do advise any and all of our listeners to take care of themselves first. So don't jeopardize that for this particular podcast. So we will be talking about just the basic details about it. But at the end of the day, it is essentially the same premise, and it's the same idea over and over and over again. So please take care of yourselves.
Exactly.
The first thing is we're going to cover our bases. So what is a mass shooting, right? So a lot of states, I think, have their own definition of what is considered a mass shooting. So I pulled two definitions, one from dictionary.com. It says a single incident involving the shooting with one or more firearms of a number of people, but more than two and typically a large number, especially when the victims are random. So that's from dictionary.com. Another one says, defines mass shooting as an incident in which four or more people are shot and killed, including the shooter. And I think the most universal or the most common definition is an incident that involves four or more people who are either shot, injured, and or killed. So
I think that's interesting that there's different definitions, though, because it does it lends itself towards the way we perceive what is happening if we have different definitions of things. You know what I mean? Like, and this is not a takeaway from the atrocity of someone going and killing people in public spaces, you know. But I do think I hate people who like I hate when people try to like say like the media is like against us and the media is just not telling us the truth. But I do feel like if we operate from different definitions that could be spent in different ways.
Oh yeah, it definitely like creates from the streamlining of statistical matters for one, and like as far as logistically, it just like prevents from streamlining it. So, you know, today in this state, we might not consider that a mass shooting when, you know, the number may be higher if we had included that, which was a mass shooting. Only two people died. And I think also it invalidates those lives that were lost.
Yeah.
And so, especially if it's a mass shooting, right? Regardless of if two people or one person is harmed or 20 people are harmed, it really should not matter. Especially if it's a random person, like,
yeah.
To me, that's what signifies a mass shooting. If there is a random victim, I don't know them.
Randomness in public is what really, to me, is like the biggest identifier for a mass shooting. So I think if they really, because we've really seen a string of shootings that have the same type of optics, you know, like they go into a school or they go into a grocery store or they go into a crowd of people. It's this like randomness tied to it that I do think that should maybe have its own definition. That's not just mass shooting, because mass shooting, like you said, could be, you know, someone goes into a home and shoots two people, mass shooting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I really think when we're talking about the string of shootings that we've seen, it's like this sort of like, it's like a horrific trend in how to go and like kill people on a killing spree. And it's usually involving public, and it's usually involving multiple people. It's usually involving some like angry person or quote, I don't even want to say mentally disturbed, because I feel like some of these people aren't mentally disturbed. But
for sure.
It involves someone who has an automatic weapon and goes and just like shoots up a building or something. Totally like ad nauseum, just random. You know what I mean? Like not trying to with no sort of, I don't know, no like real tie or like beef, I guess, with the people that they're killing. It's more like their own issue, and it's premeditated. It's like premeditated mass murder.
And that's what I think makes it, you know, that's why you have to have that definition difference, right?
Yeah.
And not because I feel like a lot of times all killings usually have some level of a motive, right?
Yeah.
But like the motive is intentional when you have the ability to plan, you know, example for like the 4th of July one that was pretty recent. That person was planning that, you know, way before. So that intent to go do something random, there was no emotional tie to those individuals that were killed versus like if it's, you know, for example, like gang related. Usually they're killing gang to gang, you know what I mean? That's their beef, you know? So not saying that a killing is a killing and a life is lost in that, and that's never okay. However, you know, when there's a specific target in mind, you know the consequences of taking that person. You know what I mean? Versus if you don't know that person, it's just random. You have no idea what you're messing with.
Exactly.
Or who you're messing with.
Exactly. So. Yeah, I think there needs to be a different definition between like, you know, just the string of murders, mass shootings that we've seen versus the ones who are I guess, more targeted or more
Yeah.
like a personal vendetta or a personal beef.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I think because there's also been different highly publicized mass shootings where it was like somebody went to an office building and shot up people because
Mm-hmm.
their wife left them or whatever. Like,
Yeah,
you
true.
know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So say you had to make the definition, what would your definition be?
well, I don't know if I have the fancy words for it right now, but for the mass
Right.
shootings that we've seen, like at Uval, Texas, Uval, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, and at the grocery store in Buffalo, New York, and like even like Dylan Roof, that to me feels premeditated. It needs to have premeditated in there. It needs to be random.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be
Mm-hmm.
in reference to automatic weapons. It needs to
Mm-hmm.
be in reference to things like hate crimes or
Mm-hmm.
targeting specific groups of people. It needs to be in reference to, we're not going to say the mental disorder thing. We're not going to even touch on that for the definition. I think, and it needs to be, I think we need to address it as a terrorist act.
Yeah,
That's what I think it needs to be. That needs to
for
all be in
sure.
that definition.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that. I agree with that. Yeah.
At the very least, and maybe there's some more out there I'm missing, but I think at the very least, those need to be in there.
Mm-hmm. I think we also need to quantify the,
Or yeah, you're right.
yeah, the number. I do think because, there's a difference between like, a racially motivated crime that is, 5 people versus maybe 1. And that's not to negate that the racial motive behind the shooting or the incident, but a mass shooting includes a multitude of people. So I do think that needs to be clarified.
I would say to me, math does feel like it has to be kind of 4 or over.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
that number is probably a good number.
Mm-hmm.
4 or over, and then tied to again that terrorism idea,
Mm-hmm. Racially motivated,
racially or
premeditation.
premeditated,
Mm-hmm.
and it has to be, to me, the randomness is important too. It's not like
Yeah.
they had any connection to these people. They just went
Mm-hmm.
to a specific site where they knew these type of people would gather and then shot it and then
Yeah.
shot, into the building.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think that is what is describing this type of
Incident.
crime. Yeah, these types of incidents that we're seeing.
Yeah, and I mean across the board for like what we've seen in America, that's most of these incidents or shootings involve those aspects typically.
Yeah,
If not one or a couple of them, some of them all.
exactly.
So,
yep.
Yeah,
That's what I think really, that's what seems to be the through line with all of them. Is they check off those few boxes and it's like, that's what, they are intending to do. And that's what they like end up doing.
Yeah. Very disheartening.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very disheartening. So I'm also going to link this website in the description below too, but it's called Gun Violence Archive, and they basically describe in like brief details the different I want to say gun violence throughout the United States. Obviously, I don't think it's just specific to mass shootings, but they do have a mass shooting category. But definitely take a look at it. It's very disheartening, very sad to watch. I think I was looking at the website last night, and as of today, there's already been 2 mass shootings. No one, unfortunately, or excuse me, no one fortunately passed away or was killed because of these 2 events, but 9 people were injured. So that just goes to show you that these things are happening any and all day based off that the definition 4 or more people are involved in an incident, whether killed or injured. So just today, there's been 2. Yesterday, there were 1, 2, 3, 5. There were 5. So, and of those 5, 6 people lost their lives because of that. So very sad. Even one was yesterday was in North Charleston, South Carolina, conveniently. So, which is where I used to live. So, on the road that I lived adjacent to. So,
Yeah.
very real. Very real.
Very real. And it's like, it's just, you can't expect these sort of things. So it's like, as a citizen walking around the world, that you can't like prepare for someone, just like someone's anger, I guess, someone's terroristic intentions. You can't prepare for that, you know? And so it just puts, it's like they instill fear in society in general because they're angry or whatever.
Yeah.
About like whatever, you know, they're angry about. And it's like, you are creating a hostile environment because you are not okay with whatever's going on with yourself.
Yeah.
That's what toxicity is. That is a mental health that does that as well. But that's what I have. That is the cancer to me, is when you go and affect other people's lives. Like, unfortunately, these terrorists have been successful in instilling fear into the American heart, just in general, because it's like, we don't know what type of person is going to just open fire. We don't know.
Yeah. And it's like, it always makes you afraid to do anything. Like,
yeah,
you know, just going anywhere, like
miserable as they are.
Yeah. 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 Literally disgusting.
Yeah, it's
literally disgusting.
Like this massive society-wide misery loves company type thing, where like they're upset about whatever, about the life that they don't live, or the whatever they don't have, or whatever privilege they feel like they should have, or whatever. Like they don't, because they've been unable to achieve it or have not been given it. Nobody's given anything, newsflash, but like because they haven't been given it, or it hasn't been easy for them, or whatever, they've been outcast. It's like everybody else is going to feel the wrath of that anger. I really see is, I see this as a male anger problem, and I'm specific to say male because you look at all the people who are being who are doing this. There's not one woman, and there's no like people of color. So really, this is a white like male anger thing. It really is. You know what I mean? And that's not even trying to be. That's like look at the mug shots.
Seriously,
who is it every time? And I really feel like that is not separated from this conversation. Like I think you have to speak about it from a white male anger perspective.
Yeah, or like not stroking the male ego, because I think while anger may be the bigger premise from this, I think men feel very entitled to a lot of things, right? And that provokes them to be angry because they may not have those things that they feel like they're entitled to have. And I'll talk more specific about that when we get into certain cases. But, you know, there's one individual that we'll talk about later. He basically was just mad because he was not getting the attention that he thought he should have. So, first of all, that's scary to think that just because you think you should get something, you go and take someone else's life.
Exactly.
Those things do not equate to each other at all.
I really want to understand the psychology of it. I think because this is a relatively new like phenomenon. I mean, it's not super, super new, but people have not, in my opinion, done the real due diligence to understand the psychology, pathology of this type of person, because it's a type of person. It really is. Like, what is really causing this? I think it's a combination of things, but yeah.
I mean, I think also too, like, while I don't think mental health is an excuse, I do think you do have to acknowledge that that can play a role in that, but that is not an excuse for you to behave like a child.
I'm talking about even separate from mental health. I think it's a combination of like the way society has been progressing towards more I'm not saying it's becoming anti-man, but people are re-examining the patriarchy, and people are examining why we're why we are privileging male men in our society when a lot of times they've proven inept at leading and, making like lead, being heads of the society or whatever. So people are really, really re-examining that. And I think for a lot of men who already did not meet the quote ideal male standard, they feel especially outcast because they already didn't meet the standard when there was a patriarchy. So they were left out that way. But now that things are even progressing further towards
definitely not meeting it.
anti-patriarchy, they're certainly outcast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Their one hope is now even gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think also too that, and especially in the time that we're living in, because I'm going to go ahead and say this just because this is statistically who's been doing this. White men feel entitled to these things, such as like access to women, access to finances, access to being popular, access to being wanted, access to being desired. And that's not always the case.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. That is okay.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have those things to feel whole.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're battling with that, then you need to seek some help.
Yeah.
Nobody else is going to fix that.
Exactly.
So,
I know I've
seen
white male anger like firsthand. I'm telling you, this shit's scary. And it's scary because it's not the same as like other racial forms, other race groups' angers, although not that other men don't get angry, and that's scary too.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the edge with white male anger is they do actually still have the privilege to enact and carry out these things like, a mass shooting or to get someone like fired or to they a lot of times still have the privilege, so they enact their anger with the full privilege still intact.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
and I mean, they really don't have any threats of doing that. You know what I mean? Like they're going to be protected before anybody else is.
And they lash out in very they really just be on some fatal stuff. And to me, a lot of the at least the angry white men I've come across have always been extra scary because they are they jump from 0 to 100, and 100 is like some just on some fatality stuff, like some barbaric fatality stuff. It's not just like I'm angry and I yell or whatever. It's like I'm angry, you have to die. Like it's like that kind of stuff. So or just trying to cut you down as much as possible. You know what I mean?
Pretty much.
Experience that. Don't reject the white man. You'll see what I'm talking about.
I mean, I think it's within reason, obviously. I think some of them know how to take that. Okay, so we're not speaking for all.
Not all of them.
Some of them know how to take it, but a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say some of the ones that I've come across will be very quick to anger, and it's like obviously it's an immaturity thing too, but it's scary how quickly they can turn into that like mass shooter type vibe when they're not getting what they want, especially from women and then women of color. Imagine. Yeah. Anyways, go ahead, continue with what you said.
I digress. But no, seriously, those are like valid concerns because I mean, I think especially like historically speaking, from what America was based off of, white men have been able to have access to Black women at whatever cost, right? We were whatever they wanted us to be, when, where, how, all of those things, right? And so now that we have those freedoms, especially those who have ties to like racially motivated groups or racially triggered groups, I guess you can say, or just suffer from even low self-esteem, historically speaking, they still feel they should have those things.
They should still have, yeah.
So
now that we live in a world where you don't just automatically have access to people of color or women or children,
women in general,
when you just don't have access, immediate access, the way you have been told that you should just have access, they get angry about it, which is wild because I'm like, you realize that like the very thing that is making you unappealing to these groups of people that you claim you want is your behavior. Like that's really what makes people not attracted or interested in being around you, is because of the way you behave.
And I promise you, doing something like a mass shooting does not make people even more interested in you. That makes them even more repulsed.
Exactly.
So if that's what you're looking for from it, like say said attention or whatever notoriety, I promise you, it's not going to be in a positive light. And at the end of the day, whether you have that or you don't have that, you're going to live your life in prison.
Exactly.
If not, you're going to get a death sentence. So, I mean,
I think it takes a certain level of ignorance too. I'm gonna be honest, to carry out a mass shooting. I think you have to be you have to lack a level of self-awareness or be totally so deprecating and so have such low self-esteem that you really see nothing for yourself but jail or whatever as the option if you commit this crime.
Well, I don't know, because okay, so we'll go ahead and get into one of the cases that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Charleston mass shooting. And so let me run through really quick. Basically, what happened? What happened?
It was a big one.
Yeah, this was a big one. This was pretty well known. So it happened at Mother Emanuel AME Church on July 15, 2015. It happened in Charleston, South Carolina, which ironically, this happened right before I went to college. And I was going to college in Charleston. So this was a big deal. So a white male, Dylan Roof, walked into the church. I think it was around 12 a.m. or something like that. They were having a night service. And ended up killing 8 people in this majority, predominantly Black church, where he also killed the mayor. So yeah, he injured the reverend that was, it's not the mayor. He injured the senator, Reverend Pinkney. I think that's how you say it. Then he tried to kill himself, but he was out of ammo. So yeah. Yeah. We will go ahead and give a moment to
the lives lost.
To the lives lost in this particular shooting, and to their families as well, friends and family.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Roof P pled guilty to 9 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and a weapons charge for the massacre, which he had been planning. So Dylan has already been sentenced. He has a death sentence. He's one of the first to be sentenced to a death sentence for a federal hate crime, which congratulations to that. We approve of that. But here's the thing that I want to talk about with this one. Dylan has been quoted saying, or I won't say quote, it was in a news article, because I don't know if they specifically talked to him or not, but saying that he thought that the white supremacist group that he was a part of, or that he is a part of, was going to get him out for these murders, and that he was going to be A-okay. He was going to be A-okay. So while I do think, obviously, there's a level of ignorance, a huge level of ignorance. In his case, do you think that was also a level of brainwashing?
I can see that. I mean, I think the idea of one race being racially superior to another is already a mental distortion of reality.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
So I'm not going to call it a disease, because I just hesitate. I don't like when people put medical diagnoses on social things like racism or sexism, because that is a choice. People choose that. So this idea of medically being they're just somehow affected by this and they can't help it sort of thing, I don't like to give it, because the medical thing gives it an excuse, in my opinion. But again, like I said, it's a mental distortion. I think racism in the first place is already a distortion. So I can see that there could have been a level of brainwashing for sure. But if you think about where did he get his brainwashing from? There's so much access and resources for him to have been brainwashed, given the culture that we live in.
Yeah.
And the area, I mean, he's from South Carolina. He's from the same county in South Carolina that we are from. Caitlin, the school he went to, White Knoll, is 20 minutes away from our house where we live.
Yeah.
I've played volleyball games at White Knoll High School. Caitlin,
I actually went there. So
Yeah. Like when I tell you this is like this specific mass shooting hits very close to home for us. It does because like I even knew somebody who was sadly passed away and was one of the people that Dylan Ruse killed. Okay? So like this is like very personal, and it's in Charleston, it's in South Carolina. It gets very personal, and I feel like the Dylan Roof, when you know what the culture in South Carolina is, specifically Lexington County, where he's from, where we're from, you know how a Dylan Roof can come about.
Happen. Yeah. And that's what I was going to say was that I think...
have more Dylan Roofs. There probably are.
I'm sure there are. I do think, here's the thing, like while there is access to something better and to a way to educate yourself, the culture in Lexington County is very much so white is superior, black is not, in my personal opinion and in my experience. I remember like with us specifically, I think we were in kindergarten. And we had that our very first experience with dealing with realizing that we were black, aka less than, and not only by that particular student, his mother, and also the school administration. So like the principal, assistant principal, and there's a couple other people that were in the office. They were basically like, "Oh, you guys are just black, and you'll never be anything more," kind of people. So the culture was that. If anything, we had to learn to adjust, not them.
Exactly.
So to me, while the access is there and the internet is readily available for you to do better and learn, better, it also, the environment and the people around eat, sleep, and breathe. And if you ask me, white supremacy there.
Yeah. I mean, Lexington is rooted, that whole area is really rooted in white supremacy. I mean, before, really, especially the part we live in, like there was like certain times black people would not cross over the lake and would not go to the side where we live now. There's obviously more black people now and like people of color now, but like they would not. There was a side that like especially going towards like Gilbert and all that. Black people were not going over there. Like that was like KKK stronghold. Okay.
Oh yeah. It probably still is.
Like people knew that very clearly. So like this is not like, it's not something that is removed from really, the remnants of it are still there like to this day. So it's not really removed totally from the hearts and minds of people there. And I think like that's how a Dylan Roof can come about when you combine the white supremacy, which is already the underlying foundation of the area we live in, okay, white supremacy. Then you combine that with the outcast nature he was in. He was an outcast. You combine that with lack of education, and you combine that with the feeling entitled and being stripped away from like this like male idea of like what someone should be. You know what I mean? Like I think when you combine these two or three things, you get a like monster, an ill-adjusted monster type person like Dylan Roof.
Yeah, and then it's excusable because he's a white male. So,
or they try to excuse it anyways.
Yeah, or they try to. I mean, I don't think anybody was going to let this one fly just because of the nature of the crime.
Yeah, and I'm glad that South Carolina, at the end of the day, like even immediately they stepped up and were like, this is like a hate crime. You realize this is a hate crime, and that you killed 9 people, so you will be. You know what I mean? Like there was really. I mean, I remember watching the judges, whatever, and the judge was like very matter of fact, like you're going to jail for the rest of your life. There's no real. There is no bond, bail, or like whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or did they set a bail for him?
I don't think he had a bail because he was already, I think by the time he had done that, and he had fled too. So it wasn't like, they also had to then search for him because he had fled. And so I want to say they already called it a hate crime because they already knew it was racially motivated. I want to say by the time they had like found him and stuff like that and done their research or whatever, because it was pretty like well known with quick research that he had premeditated this and that he was targeting an African American church or some type of Black community fellowshipping place. Because I don't think this was the first on his list. I think he had a list of places he was going to go to, I want to say.
Oh, really?
I think so. And I want to also correct myself too. I think I said that the Reverend, aka the senator, that he had been injured, but he actually passed away. So it was 9 in total by the end of everything.
I mean, commend them for acting swiftly with the situation, but I think they knew if they didn't act swiftly with the situation and really reprimand him seriously immediately, that like the entire everything was going to come under intense scrutiny.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. South Carolina had to do this right. Like they really had to do this right, especially because previous to this, there were other
there's also
like huge cases that happened too. And so they had to get that right.
I just think there's also no denying it. Like the guy was on tape.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Mind you, he pretty much not documented it, but like he kept like a trail, electronic trail basically of what was going on. He had, like searches and stuff that he was doing. So that's traceable. You have a list. If you have this written down on the list of it, that's traceable. Like, so.
I also think like, from Dylan's perspective, I don't know what's going on in his head. Not that I really care, but like, you have to realize that like they didn't mind throwing you away, locking you up, throwing you away as the scapegoat because you were the poor, dumb white kid who would go do this.
Yeah, they weren't going to do it.
Exploitation. Whoever you're listening to, whoever is starting this underground white supremacist movement or whatever. Them and their kids are going to sleep at night. They're not thinking twice about Dylan Roof
at all.
And as a matter of fact,
they're probably like, oh, he should have been locked away. Now that they see what has happened.
It's like, so I'm like, I don't think that they are. It's like they're deceiving even the white men who they are getting to come up into these ranks because they're not doing it. They know what the ramifications are, and they're not losing their lives behind it. They just spread hate speech, hoping that you're dumb enough, frankly, to do it.
Yeah. Yep.
So
it's just like super sad. Like innocent lives were lost, and especially in like a place like a church, right? So I don't know. Me and Courtney were kind of like raised going to church, and that was like one of the safe havens.
Supposed to be,
I would say. It's supposed to be, but that was an eye opener that you were not safe anywhere for me, especially going to school down there. A month or so later, I was like, oh God, okay, that's concerning. No one's safe. Mind you, previous to this, a lot of shootings that are well known were happening at like, high schools or, colleges and stuff like that. That was pretty much the main arena there. I think there was one in a movie theater prior to, but other than that, it was pretty much schools, college. And now you have, this safe place that you think is a safe haven is no longer a safe haven anymore. So,
exactly. And it feels like I was saying before. I like knew somebody who was unfortunately like one of his victims was killed in this. So it makes it like that could have been
more real.
It makes it more real because you know that person and you had a personal like connection with that person. You saw that person walking around, living life, and like being happy individual, and that person is no more because of something racially motivated. And this person was killed for the very reason that I could have been killed because she was black. You know what I mean? Like that's really all it was. And I just feel like that's what's disheartening because that could have been me, that could have been my sisters, that could have been my mom, that could have been anybody that I knew in a church on just like at a prayer meeting. You know what I mean? Like, given the religious background of our family too, like that's not even it was not even
rare. And that's another thing too. In Black churches, no matter what you are, you come as you are in a sense, right? They invite any and everybody to come and be a part of their, their worship, their fellowship, whatever you want to call it, right? And so they pretty much did that with him.
Yeah, they welcomed him.
They welcomed him with open arms, like,
Judas in the Bible.
Not knowing what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Or the risk that comes with.
It's
So yeah,
it's like inviting in your like the betrayer, the murderer.
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, Dylan Roof, he's interesting. So there's been quite a few reports of him complaining about his treatment in Virginia. I want to say he's housed in like Indiana or Virginia or something like that. But he's been complaining about his
He's in a federal prison, correct?
Oh yeah, he's federal prison. He has federal charges.
Okay.
About him complaining of his by his sentence. So he was just saying how he's gone on a bunch of like hunger strikes and stuff, complaining about his treatment. About just various things. But buddy, here's what I don't understand. You do the crime, you do the time, buddy. Okay? You made this decision. For the most part, if you commit a murder, you're not getting out. You're not getting away with it. You know what I mean? It's very few people, especially in today's world of like technology and whatnot, that you're getting away with it. Mm-hmm. Whether you have the white supremacists on your side or not.
How old would he be today? 20. He's older than us, like 27, 28.
Yeah, maybe. I think he did the crime when he was 21. So that was 2015. So 2020, he would be 20, 25, 26. And then, so 27, about 27. Well, about 28, 29. 28, 29. Well, no, maybe 27, 28. Because it depends on when his birthday is. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, he's in his later 20s.
About to turn 19 the time. Well, June, he was 18. Right?
Yeah. Apparently, he was a 22-year-old ninth grade dropout.
So he only finished ninth grade?
Mm-hmm. He only finished ninth grade. So
I'm going to be honest with you. In my life and experience, I have noticed people who tend to be less educated. I don't even want to just. I know this is not always the case statistically, but I'm going to be honest. The people I've met who have not finished high school or college are some of the people who also have some of the biggest issues as far as like anger, temperament, emotional control, those sorts of things. You know what I mean? Like who really don't have a grasp on adulthood or life or how to conduct themselves in a lot of ways. That's my experience. I'm gonna say my experience of that.
Yeah, I can say from my experience, I can see that for sure. Those who have not, but I also think that's not limiting because there's also a lot of men that I have encountered that are the same thing and have gone to college. So
yeah, and that's what I'm saying. And I've met people in college who I'm like, you give me Dylan Roof vibes.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's in the same class as me, which is concerning. So yes, it's not. I don't think it's a catch-all. I'm just saying when I look back through and the people I know in my life who have been, who haven't been, who've completed levels of education, the people who tend to be on the more volatile scale tend to be the ones who either did not complete high school or did not complete college.
Yeah, true. That's true.
Tend to be. Okay, yeah. That's want to make sure that's clear. I'm not saying that is all, because you can have somebody with a PhD who is a psychopath. Okay, we're not saying it's all, and you can have somebody who never went to school and is like the kindest human being. Like it's not a catch-all. I'm just saying when I look at it, and when I look at my experiences of people, that's it tends to be on that level. The people I know who have not been as educated tend to not be as, I don't want to say well-rounded, but like not as altogether. Let's say that. They tend to be more hostile. They more emotionally driven, unhinged, unable to really a lack of a certain level of self-awareness, tend to have issues.
Yeah,
much more.
No, I can see that.
Than the college people, and I met people in college who I'm like, you lack those things too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Even outside of college, I've met them too.
Yeah, I've met people who too. So like, it's not like one way or another, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. So another update with Dylan Roof currently is another update with Dylan Roof, this is shocking to me. I guess every criminal does it. I don't know. He has taken his charges, his conviction, and asked the Supreme Court to pretty much reevaluate his sentence due to his mental illness. He pled guilty, so basically he avoided a trial. He just pled guilty, and the charges were handed down, right? And then he received his sentence. But basically now he's trying to go back and include his mental illness related evidence to see if he can get his sentence reduced and or changed, as well as some of the handlings of his case and whatnot. But he pled guilty. So anyways, whoever, I want to say this is like the second hearing that he's had. One of the hearings, they basically said, basically, absolutely not. You deserve one of the harshest sentencings because of the type of crime that you committed. So kudos to them for that too.
I think it would be very, very difficult just with public opinion. I think it would be very difficult for him to get anything shifted in any kind of way ever. Like, I don't hate to say it, but the truth is, I really think he's going to have to just die. Like, I really think that's what.
Which he was sentenced to death, so I'm assuming that's what he's trying to overturn his death sentence and get maybe like a life sentence kind of thing. But my buddy, you did the crime, you do the time. This was very premeditated, very premeditated. While in that premeditation, that time to plan, you also had the time to plan not to do this, right? And if you had a mental health illness, you had time to find resources.
Yeah.
Right. And so, if they overturned it or they changed his sentence, I think people would be livid. I mean, I would be livid.
That's what I think. I know, public opinion is not supposed to really get into court and legal proceedings. So I'm sure we're going to proceed with it as if, he has legitimate grounds to stand on. But I do think that regardless, I think any rational judge who exists in the world today would look at it and be like, not on my hands. I'm about to overturn.
Nobody wants that on their hands. I think they would ruin their reputation as a judge.
Yeah, I think they would. And I really think that I just think in the court of public opinion, this situation would not bode well in the least bit.
And beyond public opinion, I think the logistically, because first of all, you pled guilty. Period.
Yeah.
Mind you, you have all this evidence saying that you were the person. You were caught on video camera doing this crime. You fled. So that's guilt. As well as, all the ammunition you took in, all these other things that you had. You even said you were part of a white supremacist group, and then you go shoot up an all-black church. Guilty. So it's going to be really hard to prove whether you have mental illness or not. Which, when you did your mental evaluation to prove that you were sane enough to plead guilty, you passed it. So now all of a sudden you have some mental health issues. No, buddy, that's just not going to fly. You can't. That's not how that works.
Agreed.
That's just not how that works. And even if you have a mental issue, you're still going to jail. You're on federal hate crime charges.
Exactly.
That's not some little slight work.
Yeah.
That's not, that's some of the top charges.
I was going to say, that's pretty much you are going going in the history books at that point.
And he already is. You're the first one on hate crimes to be sentenced to a death sentence.
Exactly.
Buddy, just, you at this point, you just got to ride that out.
You got
to ride it out.
Death probably is the easier option for him.
It is.
Probably the easiest.
Yeah.
Because
100%.
I really don't see them doing anything about that. People have already thrown his life away, and he took it for them. Actually,
yeah, he did it. He did them. He did it himself.
He did do himself. I mean, 21 is a very young age to be throwing your life away like that, but you did.
Yeah. And I think to me also too, now, this is that happened in 2015. And now we're in 22. So that's 8 years, something like that. Now you're finally realizing that, something's wrong. Something's wrong with maybe me. What I did was possibly wrong, which I don't even know if he has any remorse. I think he's just doing it because he can to prove a point, right? I don't really think he cares, to be honest. And I doubt he's not a white supremacist anymore. I'm sure he still is. So, I have no remorse for this guy. Me personally, I think even the death sentence is a little slight. I think that's a little too light for him because you took people's lives for senselessness, really. And who cares what your race is? Who cares? That is, I mean, at this point, especially in 2015, like we have progressed. I wouldn't say a whole lot, but we have progressed to the point where Black people are pretty prevalent within that area.
Mm-hmm.
You know, White Knoll is probably more African American based than, said, like the school we went to, Lexington.
What's interesting to me is, like, I'm gonna be honest with you, especially in Lexington, if people don't really understand the demographics of like the rural South, it's like there's a lot of poor white people. So like,
he was one of them.
Probably one of those in that demographic. And
no,
so,
he definitely was.
Yeah, and a lot of the Black people who do live in those areas are middle class to upper middle class. So a lot of Black people aren't necessarily like poor Black people. I mean, I say that there aren't poor Black people in that area, but like a lot, especially in Lexington, most Black people are like college educated, part of the middle class, if not upper middle class realm of things to even be in Lexington. More than not, I would say your poverty rates, you're going to see white people who are poor, really poor in Lexington County specifically. So that's just always interesting to me because when you look statistically at like specifically that county, it's like 9 times out of 10 you're going to run into a poor white person before you run into a poorer Black family.
Oh yeah,
to tell you the truth, and that's the truth. And I don't think people realize that about the rural South or rural areas is like there's a lot of poor white people too, a lot of that.
Yep.
It just doesn't have the same stigma. You know what I mean? That being poor and Black does.
Yeah, it's just disturbing.
Yeah,
it's a little disturbing.
I mean, if you think about it, where populations of poor Black people are usually in more urban areas, correct? Which there's a population in Columbia of like poorer Black people who are in like more urban areas, right? But in Lexington, the rural area, you're going to run into a trailer, but quicker.
Yeah.
You're going to run into any kind of like, you know, I don't know, like project type, like a stereotypical project building. Like you're not going to, Lexington doesn't support the infrastructure for poor Black people. It supports the infrastructure for poor white people.
Yeah, and that's not to say that anything's wrong with having a trailer, but we're talking about
we're talking demographically here.
Yeah,
we actually physically go to places like Lexington, and we know because we grew up there that is what 9 times out of 10. Yeah, and we would know because we used to ride through the backcountry with our mom while she was going to do trainings and stuff like that, and we were always like we would see people in almost abject poverty, and they were oftentimes white.
Oh yeah,
people that we were like we thought we were bad, but this is worse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think like also the population around there is very just like, I hate to say like, because you have like some really rich people there, and then like on the other end of that is you have quite a bit of poverty, especially in like Gilbert, like Hopkins area, some parts of like KC and stuff like that. It's very rundown and very like drug infested, very like
Saluda,
questionable individuals, like, you know, drugs, like a lot of things going on there. So, and that doesn't excuse anything, but you know, to understand, get a good picture of what's going on and why this type of individual who supports, I guess, white supremacy would exist is because there's a lot of ignorance. There's a lot of
lack of resources,
a lot of stuff going on, you know?
Exactly.
So just because you have access does not mean you're taking advantage of that. So,
but what's ironic to me, though, I'm gonna be honest with you, is these are the same words they use to describe
Black people.
Black people are when Black people have issues or commit crimes. It's still lack of resources, lack of education, lack of whatever. And that's the exact same thing you see when you go down, when you drive down, you know, Gilbert and don't see like, you know, a grocery store for like 20 miles. And you just like
and it's not even a grocery store. It's like a Food Lion. Not even Food Lion. I mean, like a General Dollar or something.
General Dollar. Or like you do realize that you are white and you are also without resources.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And it's like,
Yep.
and the thing is, there are wealthier white people in the area
Mm-hmm.
who capitalize off of the less educated, the less like people with less resources. They capitalize. They use that. They bank on you
Crazy.
too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so and like you do realize that this is, you are also who they are talking about when they talk about lack of resources, lack of
Oh
education,
yeah.
lack of
Yeah,
access.
but I mean, I think also too, statistically speaking, they don't like to include white people. Like they're above that. You know what I mean? So I think they do target those statistics more towards African American, but that doesn't excuse you from being a part of that experience, nonetheless. Because if you're white trash, you're white trash.
The only thing they have is whiteness, which is the one privilege that they pull, which is what he pulled. He had one privilege, whiteness.
Yeah.
Because truth be told, socioeconomically, status-wise, every single one of those people in the church was probably all better off than him.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Education, financials, status, emotionally, like all these other lees, they probably were better off than him.
Yeah, I can probably assure that.
The only thing he pulled is whiteness, which is what makes his crime so heinous.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that really, like you said, was the only advantage. His only advantage was because he was white, and his only advantage was because he obviously had premeditated this crime as well as had this gun. So, which, the thing that constantly perpetuates this idea of whiteness as well is that this man gets to live still. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He still gets to live while those African Americans have lost their lives. They don't get to live on. They don't get to experience life anymore because of his decision, while he gets to continue to live. And I understand the death penalty. And in his case, I'm here for it. You know what I mean? But I think in his case, and honestly, any of these cases, you deserve to die by the crime that you commit. Because of the heinous nature of this crime. Why should someone be valuing your life when you chose to take someone else's life?
Exactly.
Senselessly at that.
Mm-hmm. And not just one person, 9 people's lives.
Exactly. So he needs to be on that. We had an episode previous to this about the firing squad. He needs to be the first one on that firing squad. List of individuals. Obviously, he's not.
I actually do support state sanctioned like execution. I'm not even gonna lie. Like I do think there's a certain level of crimes that like probably could classify as state sanctioned executions. Yeah. And I think he qualifies.
I think so.
He's one of those people. I just feel like there's no redeeming that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. How do you legit come back from that? You don't. You don't.
You really don't. And it's what's unfortunate is really he lacked the his life turned out to be that way because of the lack that he was lacking the environment. Sorry, speaking all kind of crazy, but like the environment was lacking, so he was always going to be brewed out to be this type of person if he was not. If somebody hadn't really poured into him, which nobody ever did.
Apparently his dad was abusive or something like that, but that's not an excuse. People come from abusive households.
It's not. But I do feel like you have to look at what makes a criminal, and I do think that he was the perfect storm. I mean, lacking resources, lacking education, abusive household, probably emotionally ill-equipped, no real secure attachments, anger issues.
Yeah.
So I think there's a undercurrent of people like the Dylan Roofs of the world who end up like a Dylan Roof and do these mass shootings because they lack something, even though they use their privilege, their whiteness. The one thing they do have a privilege in is being white. And that's the one thing they capitalize off of. Everything else is lacking, absolutely lacking. And they have been shunned and outcast in our world. I'm not saying that to be empathetic towards him because he committed that crime, but I'm just saying The same way people say like, oh, well, why do black men become criminals? Is, well, so-and-so didn't have a father in his household, or so-and-so didn't, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you can cross off every single one of those things for Dylan Roof too.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to start looking at them and like making this type of white person, we have to start recognizing like what creates this kind of person too. If we're going to stereotype people of color for what creates this kind of person, you have to look at what's creating these mass shooters and white terrorists too. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not the they're the same. Crime is crime, right? And a criminal is created, not born. So how does this like come about? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we just don't associate whiteness with crime. And that's couldn't be further from the truth. Most people of color haven't encountered a white person who has, on some level, been part of some criminal or at least some problematic act. So why are we not also associating them with crime? You know what I'm saying?
Agreed. Yeah.
Like,
I mean, they're just as likely as anybody else. So
exactly.
Yeah.
That's not to say all white people are criminals. I'm not saying that before somebody takes that out of context. What I'm saying is, for clarity, no, because I just feel like somebody would take that wildly out of context.
Yeah, for sure. Which y'all might be. So if the shoe fits.
Well, what I'm saying is like, if we can't discount, we have this narrative that a criminal looks like a certain kind of person, which is usually a person of color, usually a male of color, right? Why are we not also looking at when we clearly see that there's this demographic of people who are committing these types of crimes, mass shootings, right? Like a Dylan Roof. If we see that
regardless of race.
Yeah, if we see this stuff, we have to hold that person and the same, like what is creating that kind of person. And the issue is what they don't want to admit is it is rooted in white supremacy. It is rooted in patriarchy. It's rooted in these really deeply uncomfortable conversations that people don't want to have.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that would call into question our entire narrative, our entire...
Yeah, and you would have to reevaluate the foundation of America if you call that into question. And God forbid that happen.
You have to call a lot of stuff to really address a Dylan Roof type problem. You got to call a lot of people, a lot of men, a lot of white people into question.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't want to call it into question.
It would no longer be a safe place for them. I can tell you that.
Exactly. But so they just allow this type of person to continue recklessly to commit these sort of crimes without like addressing it collectively.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, Dylan, that case right there definitely hit home for us because we were just like, it's in the state that we live. He went to the school that I went to. He literally lives up the street from us. That could have literally been us. As well as we knew a victim that lost their lives to this crime too. So definitely disheartening, 1000%. And like we said in the beginning of getting into this one specifically, we send our condolences to those families and friends that may have lost someone or may have experienced anything like this. So, yeah, definitely beyond words. So sad.
Yeah.
All right. So, can I pause the episode?
Yeah.
So now we're going to go ahead and get into the, is it Uvalde? Is that how you say that? Uvalde.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Uvalde, Texas school shooting, which was another one that happened earlier this year. Once again, we want to send our condolences to those who have lost someone or lost their lives during this senseless act. So this one happened at Robb Elementary on May 24th, earlier this year in Uvalde, Texas. So what happened was this particular shooter, his name is
Salvador.
Salvador. There we go. Ramos. He was 18 at the time of the shooting. He shot his grandmother. I guess they lived together, I'm assuming. They lived in the same household, or maybe he was visiting. However, he shot his grandmother. Then he took the car and went to the school, crashed the car near the school, ran into the school, barricaded a group or a classroom of fourth graders into a room, the room they were already in. And he unfortunately killed 19 children, 2 teachers, and 2 police officers by the end of this incident. He had a AR-15 on him, and there was no sign of mental health issues with this particular individual. So Salvador, or Ramos is his last name, he was fatally shot during this incident. And
did the police shoot him, or was he shot? Who shot him?
I'm pretty sure it was the police that shot him once they finally got. Well, they were there. Their response. We'll talk about that later. But their response was very questionable. Very questionable.
It took 78 minutes for officers to confront gunmen. That's that's a long time.
That's a long time. Mind you, I think they were on the scene that entire 78 minutes. So that's an hour. That's over an hour.
I don't know if they're going to sue them for that, but that sounds like a lawsuit to the police department.
It does. Oh, 100%. It probably 100%.
Especially 19 fourth graders. I think that would be a lawsuit.
Yeah. I don't think they all were fourth graders, but 19 children total by the end of this event were killed, including 2 teachers and 2 police officers. So,
So a police officer must have shot him then.
Yeah, but after 78 minutes. So he had, at some point, he probably, once they came into contact with him after the 78 minutes, somehow, somewhere, he was able to shoot them. And I'm sure it was an exchange of bullets. And that ultimately probably killed.
He must have had a lot of ammo on him.
Probably. He had an AR-15, so I'm sure that's an assault rifle. That's not packing anything light, typically.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So this case is mainly interesting because of the response by the police officers. Or the lack of response, because it really wasn't a response until it was a little too late. Yeah. Anyway, so basically what happened was they pretty much just had, surrounded the school or whatever, like normal. Were trying to approach the shooter, I guess, at some point. And then they kind of just halted for 78 minutes. They were in the school. There's video footage of this as well. Look it up if you would like to know more. And don't quote me on this stuff because it may not be completely accurate. We pretty much do a brief education for ourselves so we can regurgitate this information a little bit. But basically they kind of just halted for 78 minutes. And they were just kind of hanging out, if you will. Because I think the person in charge of the response that particular day, whoever was the highest, the chief, he apparently was quoted saying that he didn't know he was the one in charge to make the calls.
The chief?
The chief.
As in, you don't know what your job is?
Yeah, isn't that what? Huh? You are the chief. You are the chief. Yeah, and you are the chief. Can I say that any more times? You are the chief.
Somebody else, if it was some other chief, I'd be like, I must say something.
Yeah, I mean, I would be looking around too. What? Yeah.
That's getting a lawsuit for real, seriously. So I hope their police department is prepared for that.
Yeah, I hope so too, and as it should be,
Very much.
Yeah,
I don't know if I said on the podcast, but at the time I was a receptionist briefly at Lexington County, which is attached to the police department. Just the amount of money they spend on police is actually wild to me. That's all I'll say. I just saw a lot of receipts come through that were attached to police, and I was like, they spend that much on police officers? That's wild. That's where your tax money's going to, the police.
And the thing is, because like there's a heavy push to spend on like training and stuff for like police and whatnot, blah blah blah. But then you have responses like this, and you're like, if you're scared, buddy, please get out the way.
Yeah.
Like that is you sacrifice, not saying that you can't be scared, but you sacrifice your life to be a police officer. And that means that comes with all of the glitz and glam, the ugly, the truth, all of it, right? And I'm pretty sure you have to like sign an oath or something. You know what I mean? Saying that you're going to make sure you do that. You provide protection. You provide whatever the community needs. So I'm not understanding. First of all, as the chief, you are the chief. I've never heard of multiple chiefs. Who else is going to call the shots, buddy? Who is higher than you?
Exactly. I don't know.
Like, I'm not understanding.
Even if there was somebody else on the scene or whatever who was like higher rank, I guess I would at least be like making sure I'm in direct communication with them as the chief. Like, I'm the chief, I'm in charge. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyways, I just don't know. Like, how did you not believe you were in charge of the response? Like, that baffles me. Yeah. Yeah, that just baffles me. That just, ugh. Which, and also, too, another thing to keep into mind is if they had responded appropriately, could lives have been saved? You know what I mean? I don't know if all lives could have been saved because he locked himself in a classroom with students. So those kids, unfortunately, their lives were...
What is this idea of going after not random people, but people who cannot fight back? Children, people in church, people who are absolutely unprepared to even remotely fight back. What is this like? It's like a punch down. That's what it feels like.
It's like a power thing. It's it's like a power thing.
Because you know what? You didn't go right up to a police office, or you didn't go right up to like a military base, or like a government building or something. People who would be prepared to shoot at any point in time, trespassers. You went to places where they are actively accepting of people, like a church or a school or a, you know what I mean? Places where there's lower, I guess, barriers of entry. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's weird.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think it's like a power thing for them. Maybe to like pry on the weak, just because that's how they feel. Maybe I don't know. Which is like no excuse, like.
It's not, but I guess it's like, why did bullies punch down? I just think of them as like they become bullies they were probably bullied or outcast, because a lot of them don't even necessarily be bullied, but they're outcast, and then they punch down because that makes them feel like there's an easier target.
Very true. Very true. There's actually a video, I guess, of the 77 minutes of basically what the police were doing.
Yeah.
I watched like a clip of it, like I watched like a couple minutes of it, but I was just like, in the few minutes that I saw, it looks like they were just having like a little gathering, like a police kumbaya. Yeah. I mean, they have like their guns and stuff like that, but
it's getting very much like inept.
Mm-hmm.
What a lot of people like do a job just like stand around, kind of like, we don't know what it is to do, but we're just gonna stand here like we're doing something.
Yeah, right. Which, like, this is not the job to be doing that.
I don't know. Not when there's an active shooter. At the very least, I'm like, y'all should have surrounded the building.
Yeah.
And waited till the FBI, the CIA, whoever is gonna come, the SWAT team.
Exactly. Like, to me, it looks like y'all like waiting for him to come out, like
a little group of ducklings.
He's not gonna hand you himself.
Exactly. I would have at least been like, we gonna spread out, surround the building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you gotta watch the video because you can like see the like police officers like retreating after they like get shots fired and stuff like that. And I mean, it's just really interesting as it's like your job is to protect these children. Those children were not able to retreat,
and they could not protect themselves.
Exactly. You have that option, and you chose that over protecting these babies' lives.
Yeah.
There was I think a mom or whatever. She was told like not to like go get her kids or whatever. She snuck in and got her kids. She did more than the freaking police could do, and she went and found her kids. Period.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel like that's what mama bear instinct, because then you're like, at this police officer, I don't care.
Right? I don't care. I will arrest me. Because what you're not about to do is stop me from getting. And I would do the same thing as a mom, because if you guys are not going to do anything, it took you guys 78 minutes. It took me 12 to get my kids. You better believe I want to go get my kids.
Exactly.
Every time.
No, I feel
every
that.
time.
And
y'all, this is y'all's job, not mine.
And you know what? It really actually shows the like total. That's what government services are. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like these like government type positions are a lot of times is they like slow things down, or they like are totally inept to the point of somebody could lose their life behind it, and it's because they're trying to like follow protocol, or they're trying to like bureaucratize this whole thing, and it's like, this is an emergency situation. F the bureaucracy. Seriously. Evacuate the kids who are alive and get them to their parents safely. You know what I mean?
And to me, that should be a no freaking brainer. Like, how hard?
I feel like even as a police officer in that situation, I would have been like, look, I don't even care what chief so-and-so gotta say. We're not about to just wait for chief so-and-so to make a decision. Like, this is an emergency situation. Period. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. You would think that would be common sense. If you ask me and I put my life on the line and that's what I signed up for as a duty, then that should not be a problem. And that's not to take away that you're not afraid or scared or anything, but that is your job. You know what I mean? Mind you, all the money y'all have pumped into training and stuff like this, the kids did a better job than you did. Like, that's confusing to me. And this is the thing that also kills me about this. This is not the first school shooting. I can see this was the first school shooting. You don't know how to respond, and y'all don't have a protocol for how to handle these things. But you know how many school shootings there have been?
Exactly.
That's ridiculous to me. There is no excuse for this response.
I agree. But also, I think the fact that there was so, I guess, well, I don't know. It's hard to like totally, lock down a school every day, because I was going to say something about the barrier to entry for this gunman in the first place. But I do wonder, like, how did he get into the school with an automatic weapon easily?
That's very true.
You know what I'm saying? Like, where was he able to access easily to get inside a classroom of fourth grader, or not just fourth graders, but a classroom of children, and shoot them all? Because I'm going to be honest with you, like, at least for us growing up, like, you didn't get into the building from any other way but the front.
Yeah. I don't know. I wonder if they have anything on that.
If he snuck into like a side door or something.
Yeah. I don't know. Which I didn't know this, but like people like said that.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Oh, about the shooter. They were just kind of like saying how he was very like, I guess around the school that he went to, he was known as the school shooter. That was like his nickname, because he had, I guess, the look or the traits of being a school shooter. So,
yeah,
ironic, unfortunately.
And that's another concerning thing. Back to what we were saying about Dylan Roof, is this is a type of person. Let's be clear. If most of us can say, I know somebody who is a school shooter type, and that has become a common thing to say throughout high school or middle school, because even in high school, middle school, we're like, so-and-so gives me school shooter vibes. We would say that all the time.
Yeah.
About certain people who gave us off vibes. If we have to say that, that's a problem. That's a problem. That means we recognize that there is a type and there's nothing being done about it.
True. Yeah. He definitely has the look. I'm not going to lie. Like, yeah, I would have identified him as that too.
Yeah. And the thing is, when you're in school, because the first thing they like to claim is so-and-so was bullied, so that's why they reacted and they retaliated this way. It's not the reason why people don't hang out with them is because they give off school shooter vibes. Who is hanging out with the potential school shooter?
True.
Who is really the people don't hang out with them because they be weird. Because they'd be like, we're gonna.
I'm not trying to say there's anything with being weird, but like if you get that off vibe, you're not going to be likely to hang out with them.
People trying to be mean is so and so feels off. That's why we don't go around them.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Exactly. Like,
yeah, I don't know how he got into the school though. I have to look into that and see what we can find. Yeah. So that's that case. This one right here. What's tragic about this one is not only is it a school shooting and these children lost their lives, the police response is beyond unacceptable. Beyond unacceptable. Y'all got to do better. And y'all spending all this money, all these little activist groups, committees on Blue Lives Matter, and blah 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 blah. Okay, fine and dandy if that's what you think. But if y'all gonna be these Blue Lives Matter, y'all need to think about the lives that y'all are supposed to be protecting, because their lives matters too. Regardless of if you're scared or not, you have a duty to perform, and you need to perform that duty when the time is needed. And you need to perform that duty when that duty needs to be served. Not go target Black people and harass them. Okay, y'all need to pick y'all's battles.
I also think that there's I don't know. It's rather than hold the police responsible or whatever. It's arm the teachers.
Yeah, I don't get that.
More guns is the solution to a shooting problem.
I don't understand that.
When has arming everybody?
So then there's just going to be a gunfire in the classroom. So children are going to lose their life still.
Exactly. I'm like, when has arming more people gotten rid of the violence?
It doesn't. It definitely does not. That's the problem now. There's too many. What
is the issue? And it's the kind of weapons that these people are able to get access to.
Yeah.
It's why?
First of all, how are you able to get an assault rifle?
AR-15. Why?
He literally, he just turned 18. He just got the assault rifle. An AR-15, first of all, there should be some type of screening before you go and get that type of gun.
Even if you're
at minimum
old.
Oh, even if you're 50. And I'm not talking about a little light screening, like a little piece of paper you got to fill in. I'm talking about, we need to go ahead and do you a mental health evaluation. We need to make sure, check your background. We need to make sure that you don't have any history of any type of violent behavior, whether that be on social media, whether that be, through your past high school history or whatever the case may be. It just needs to be more intensive. I know in other countries, it takes years to be able to get a simple gun, let alone an assault rifle.
Exactly. And an 18-year-old just got an assault
rifle. In there and got it. Yeah. He got it for his birthday.
The thing that always disturbs me is when I hear, and I know it's some sort of bonding thing that men do with their sons or whatever. But
that's not bonding.
And what earth, I'm sorry, I hesitate to think what the mother thinks. I don't want my 10, 11-year-old son walking around with any kind of violent weapon. I wouldn't want to be with some man who also has a weapon, so consider that too. But not my child, my boy child, walking around thinking that this weapon is somehow empowering him. You know what I mean? Or her. I won't say just him, but I wouldn't want my child walking around thinking that this is somehow empowering them. You know what I mean? It does absolutely nothing for me, and I don't get it. And I just, my past job, I would hear them talk about, oh, my son has this and blah blah blah. We're going out to hunt blah 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 this weekend and blah blah. And I'm like, you're some of the most ill-adjusted adults I've ever sat around, and you let your child have a gun? You're the person who monitors them having a gun. You know
what I don't understand about this is
I don't like it. It upsets me.
When you have this gun, right, it provides a false sense of power.
Exactly.
And if you're going to have this gun, you better go ahead and be ready to serve some time.
That's what I say. I know they're not sitting there explaining the weight of what having a gun actually means to their child. They're just putting a weapon in their child's hand. It starts off this really long path of, if your child does become somebody who is ill-adjusted, you've already planted that seed.
Mm-hmm. That this is my false sense of protection or power or whatever.
Yeah. You already planted that seed, and it's just giving very much irresponsible.
Yep.
I would love to know statistics on people who were raised having guns, if they do end up becoming more volatile and violent as they grow older. People who have had prior experience in their youth with guns, if that is the statistic on that, or if it's people who just their first time getting a gun is when they go commit murder.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I would love to know what the difference is. All I know is, I know for me, anybody who, I don't ever feel more safe around people who claim to have guns. Okay. That never made me feel more safe. That's always made me like, this person now has a weapon to, if they do pop off, they now have a weapon to harm me or themselves or somebody in the vicinity. Like, that has never made me feel like, what predator are we protecting against? 9 times out of 10, you become the person.
Every time.
The person,
because I mean, the person who has the gun first, right? So whoever it has the motive, premeditation, has the upper hand here. They're usually catching you off guard, right? So even if you have a gun, what are you going to do? Pull it out so you can then get shot?
Exactly.
Like, there really isn't. There's nothing you can do.
And like, miss me with the people kill people, guns don't kill people kill people. Yes, people kill people. We all recognize that. But you know what? It's a whole hell of a lot harder and a lot longer to kill somebody when you don't have an AR-15 in your hand.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, at the very least, if somebody is trying to kill you, like, there's more you can do versus an assault weapon.
I mean, there's really no, like, you cannot bring your fist to a gunfight.
Exactly.
You've already lost. So, you know, the problem here is, me personally, I don't like guns. I don't really support guns. But if you have them in your house, I don't really agree with that. I don't think it makes, to me, you're even more of a chicken, personally.
It gives me the energy.
Yeah.
Anybody who's like flexes their gun, I'm like, I know you are overcompensating for something.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
What are you scared of? Exactly. And I hope it's not little old me. So,
that more often than not to just intimidate others.
Oh yeah,
it's like an intimidation tactic.
But with that intimidation, be ready to serve that time. Since you're always so big and bad and ready to pull that bad boy out, be ready to go ahead and go to jail. Do your sentence. We
also know that statistically, like, domestic violence cases, oftentimes when guns are used the most and used mostly against women. So, FYI, when you know, Earl buys a gun, like 9 times out of 10, he's like, I'm not saying 9 times out of 10 is specifically Earl, but like, well, fictional Earl. But most of the time, those end up getting used in domestic violence situations against women and possibly children. So that's another statistic to consider, because, to be honest with you, if they're buying the guns, then who are they harming?
Yep.
Oftentimes.
So yeah, that's the Uvalde case. Once again, another tragic, senseless murder, and nothing has been done to even combat gun laws. So,
thank you for joining us for part 1 of our discussion on mass shootings. Don't forget to join us next week to hear part 2 of this discussion.
Before we end this episode, we wanted to take some time to remind our listeners, if you or someone you know are struggling with mental or emotional health, or any of the issues we discussed in our podcast, you are not alone. There are resources to help. In the podcast descriptions, we've listed contact information for 3 resources we suggest for crisis situations. You can reach out to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or the National Suicide Prevention Hotline.